Ghost of Yotei shows us the epic life of samurai. But what did real samurai battles actually look like? The autumn mist rolled down from the peaks of Mount Yotei, a volcano so old that the people of Japan whispered it was alive. Farmers spoke of its silence, of nights when its slopes glowed faintly red, as if the mountain itself still remembered fire. Yet among the old warriors, another tale lingered. The Ghost of Yotei, a wandering spirit of a fallen samurai, cursed to drift from battlefield to battlefield, forever seeking the moment of destiny he had been denied in life. On the eve of the year 1600, Japan stood on the brink of chaos. The great warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi had died, leaving his young son heir to a fractured realm. Two titanic figures now prepared to clash for control. Tokugawa Ieyasu, patient and cunning, his banners marked by the triple Halaha crest, and Ishida Mitsunari, loyal yet desperate, rallying the Toyotomi loyalists under his command. It was to be settled at Sekigahara, a valley of fog, rice fields, and destiny. The Ghost of Yotei drifted silently, unseen by mortals, pulled by a force he could not resist. For centuries he had watched lesser skirmishes, his spectral blade hungry for glory that was never his. Now the valley's thunder called to him. He saw the armies moving, thousands of men, banners whipping in the wind, drums echoing like heartbeats of the earth itself. In the camp of Tokugawa, Ieyasu sat with his closest retainers, his sharp eyes scanning the maps by firelight. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "the country will change. If we falter, chaos will consume Japan." Meanwhile, Mitsunari rode through his lines, rallying men with words of loyalty and vengeance. "For the Toyotomi name," he shouted, his voice cracking with the weight of desperation. Neither man knew that in the swirling mists above Sekigahara, a phantom waited. The Ghost of Yotei, bound by ancient fate, longed to see which mortal hand would carve the soul of Japan, and perhaps, at last, find release. Dawn broke with a veil of fog over Sekigahara. The valley seemed swallowed by a ghostly ocean, visibility barely stretched beyond a few paces. Soldiers muttered prayers to their ancestors, hands trembling on spears, as if the world itself hesitated to reveal what fate awaited. The Ghost of Yotei drifted above them, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down. He could hear the whispers of the dead who had fallen in countless battles past, their voices carried by the mist. But today was different. The pull of destiny was heavier, as if the mountain itself had placed its judgment on this field. On the eastern ridge, Tokugawa Ieyasu's forces prepared. Nearly 70,000 strong, disciplined, their armor lacquered black, their banners stretching like a forest of Halaha crests. Tokugawa sat upon his horse, calm yet alert, his eyes narrowing as he studied the fog. He was not a man of rash action. Patience had been his greatest weapon, and today it would decide the empire. Across the valley, Ishida Mitsunari's men, 80,000 by number, were less unified. Some fought with loyalty, others with fear, and some with suspicion. Mitsunari himself was no great general, but his passion burned like a torch in the night. He walked among his captains, speaking of justice, of vengeance for Toyotomi, of righteousness against Tokugawa's ambition. Yet in the hearts of several daimyo, doubt festered. "Will you stand with me, Kobayakawa?" Mitsunari demanded the night before. The young Lord Kobayakawa Hideaki had bowed, his voice steady, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Now, on the morning of battle, the Ghost of Yotei hovered near Hideaki's camp. He could see the turmoil in the young man's soul, torn between loyalty and fear, honor and survival. The ghost whispered, though the living could not hear, "Decide, boy. The fate of an empire rests on your trembling hand." The horns of war finally sounded. Drums rolled like thunder, and men surged forward. Muskets cracked, arrows sliced through the fog, and the clash of steel echoed like the roar of gods. The Battle of Sekigahara had begun, and high above, the Ghost of Yotei watched, knowing that before the sun burned away the mist, the soul of Japan would be written in blood. The first waves of soldiers collided like storms crashing against each other. Spears shattered, Swords gleamed briefly before plunging into flesh, and the cries of dying men filled the valley, muffled by the thick fog. Tokugawa's right wing surged forward under the command of Honda Tadakatsu, the legendary general whose armor was crowned with great deer antlers. His men cut through Ishida's lines with ferocity, their polished yari thrusting like lightning. Tadakatsu himself fought at the front, his halberd sweeping men from their horses in arcs of deadly grace. Across the field, Ishida's allies strained to hold their ground. Yukita Hideai commanded thousands, his voice rising above the clash. "Hold fast, for Mitsunari, for Toyotomi." The fog was so thick that units sometimes clashed without realizing whether the men before them were friend or foe. Muskets roared, fire and smoke mixing with the mist, until the battlefield became a hellscape of confusion. The ghost of Yotei drifted low, through the chaos. He saw samurai dueling in the mud, blades ringing like temple bells. He saw Shigeru peasants, terrified, thrusting spears in desperation. He saw men trampled under horses, their final screams lost beneath the thunder of hooves. And yet, the ghost's gaze returned again and again to Kobayakawa Hideaki. The young lord stood with his 15,000 men on Mount Matsuo, overlooking the valley. His banners hung silent, his soldiers waited, restless. All around him the battle unfolded, and still he did not move. Below, Mitsunari glanced upward, his face tight with frustration. Where is Kobayakawa? Why does he not descend? His allies were bleeding, straining, breaking. Yet the young lord hesitated. The ghost whispered to him again, unseen. "Do you hear it, boy? The valley demands a choice. Strike and decide Japan's fate. Remain and be forgotten." Suddenly, a ripple of doubt spread through Ishida's camp. Men began to glance at the ridge, muttering. The fog might have hidden the full scope of the armies, but one truth cut through the haze. Sekigahara balanced on the blade of a single man's decision. The ghost of Yotei lingered, as if savoring the moment. He had waited centuries for this tension, this knife's edge of destiny, and soon someone would break. The fog began to lift as the sun climbed higher, unveiling the valley in fragments. Banners dripping with blood, bodies piled in ditches, smoke curling from volleys of muskets. The clash raged without mercy, yet the true heart of the battle still waited on the ridge of Mount Matsuo. Kobayakawa Hideaki sat motionless, his hands trembling on the reins of his horse. His retainers whispered urgently around him, "My lord, if you do not act, you will be branded a coward." "My lord, Mitsunari trusted you. Will you abandon him now?" "My lord, Tokugawa watches." Those last words struck deeper than steel. Hideaki's young face twisted with fear. He remembered nights spent under Toyotomi's protection, yet he also recalled Tokugawa's cold promise whispered in private. "Stand with me, and I will give you land enough to build an empire of your own. Defy me, and you will be crushed beneath the weight of Japan's future." Down in the valley, Tokugawa himself grew restless. He turned to his generals, his usually calm voice carrying a sharp edge. "If Hideaki does not move, he will betray us through hesitation. Fire upon him. Force the boy's hand." Cannon smoke burst from Tokugawa's lines, shells whistling upward. They crashed upon the ridge where Hideaki's men stood waiting, explosions tearing the ground apart. Hideaki flinched, his horse rearing. His retainers cried out, "They think us traitors already. If you do nothing, we are dead men." And so, with a scream more of terror than courage, Kobayakawa finally raised his sword and pointed it toward the valley. Not against Tokugawa, but against Ishida Mitsunari's flank. "Forward!" he cried. The ridge erupted into motion. 15,000 men thundered down into the side of Mitsunari's army, striking like a hammer against already weakened allies. The ghost of Yotei hovered above, his eyes blazing with spectral fire. "At last," he whispered, "the moment of betrayal, the choice that shatters empires." Chaos spread like wildfire. Ishida's allies, seeing Hideaki's treachery, faltered. Some fought on, others considered defecting, and whispers of despair spread faster than commands. Mitsunari himself, realizing the truth, shouted in rage, "Kobayakawa, you dare!" But his words were drowned by the thunder of steel and gunfire. The tide of Sekigahara had turned. The betrayal struck like lightning. Mitsunari's left flank buckled beneath the sudden fury of Kobayakawa's charge. 15,000 fresh troops, armored and hungry for survival, tore into the weary ranks of Ishida's allies. Yukita Hideai fought valiantly to stem the tide, rallying his men with desperate cries. His spear flashed in the smoke, and his retainers pressed close around him. But for every step they gained, Kobayakawa's men pushed 2 more forward. Confusion spread as Ishida's soldiers cried out in disbelief. "Kobayakawa attacks us. The traitor has chosen Tokugawa. We are betrayed." Panic is more lethal than any blade. Samurai who only moments before stood resolute now faltered. Some fled toward the rear, others simply dropped their weapons and fell to their knees in despair. The Ghost of Yotei drifted low among them, watching the unraveling. He saw Yukita struck from his horse, his banner trampled into the mud. He saw men cut down not by enemies, but by former allies they had trusted with their lives. On the central field, Mitsunari's face turned pale as the news reached him. His generals crowded around. "My lord, Kobayakawa has defected." Another added with shaking voice. Others hesitate. "Kikawa, Wakasaka, Ogawa, none move to your aid." Mitsunari gritted his teeth, his hand trembling on the hilt of his sword. "Cowards, all of them. They swore loyalty, and now they abandon me in my hour of need." Meanwhile, Tokugawa Ieyasu remained calm, almost serene. From his position, he watched the Western army crumble like a rotting structure. His lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Patience," he murmured. "The mountain falls by itself." And fall it did. Ishida's once mighty host dissolved piece by piece. Where the samurai of the east pressed forward with renewed vigor, the west fell into disarray. Banner after banner toppled. Commanders fled or surrendered. The Ghost of Yotei passed through the fog of powder smoke, his gaze settling once more on Hideaki. The boy rode triumphantly now, his fear buried under the frenzy of battle. "You chose survival over honor," the ghost whispered, "but you have written your name in fire upon the land. History will not forget you nor forgive you." Above Sekigahara, the cries of betrayal echoed louder than the clash of steel. And with each passing hour, Mitsunari's dream of Toyotomi's restoration crumbled into ash. By midday, the fog had lifted fully, revealing the valley for what it was, a graveyard in the making. Corpses lay tangled in the mud, banners snapped in the wind, and the ground ran dark with blood. The clash still raged, but the outcome was becoming undeniable. Ishida Mitsunari stood at the center of the storm, his armor stained, his face smeared with sweat and dirt. Around him, his loyal retainers urged him to flee. "My lord, you must escape. Tokugawa's victory is assured. Save yourself, and we can rally again." "No." Mitsunari's voice was hoarse but firm. "A general does not abandon his men. I will not live as a fugitive. If I am to die, it will be here, among those who still believe." His eyes blazed, not with hope, but with defiance. He mounted his horse and raised his fan, signaling the remnants of his troops. "Stand with me. Show them that even betrayed, even outnumbered, the Toyotomi cause does not bow." A ragged cheer rose. Perhaps only a few thousand remained, but they rallied to his side, forming a desperate line against the advancing tide of Tokugawa soldiers. The Ghost of Yotei drifted near, fascinated. He had seen men break before, but rarely had he seen one cling so stubbornly to honor when all hope was gone. Mitsunari's spirit burned so fiercely that the ghost felt its heat, as though the man's soul fought to etch its mark on eternity. The battle surged again. Mitsunari's men charged, screaming their lord's name. They clashed with Tokugawa's vanguard, sparks flying as steel met steel. For a brief moment, the tide seemed to pause, not turning, but refusing to sweep Mitsunari away just yet. Yet Tokugawa's generals pressed without mercy. 2 Naomasa, clad in his blood-red armor, cut through Mitsunari's ranks like a demon from legend. His sword struck down man after man, until even the bravest faltered before him. Mitsunari fought like a cornered wolf, his blade flashing, his voice still commanding, still refusing to yield. But every minute his line shrank smaller, his allies fewer. Around him, the banners of the Toyotomi cause fell one by one, collapsing into the mud. The ghost of Yotei hovered, silent, almost mournful. He had waited centuries to witness destiny, but the sight of loyalty crushed under betrayal struck deeper than he expected. And as the sun dipped lower, the Western army bled out its final strength, clinging only to pride and defiance. The valley of Sekigahara was no longer a battlefield. It was a stage where the death of an age was being written. The sun hung low, casting a golden haze across Sekigahara, but the valley glistened red with blood. The battle was no longer a clash of armies. It was slaughter. Tokugawa's east pressed forward like a relentless tide, while what remained of Ishida Mitsunari's west crumbled before them. From the eastern line, Tokugawa Ieyasu watched with measured calm. His face betrayed no joy, no triumph, only cold certainty. This was not just victory. This was the birth of an empire. "Advance steadily," he ordered. "No mercy, no haste. Let the West see the weight of inevitability." His men obeyed, their formations disciplined even amidst carnage. Samurai moved like black waves, cutting through the shattered remnants of Mitsunari's forces. Muskets fired in volleys, arrows rained down, and drums beat in perfect rhythm. A grim symphony of conquest. Mitsunari still fought. His armor was cracked, his horse slain, his sword chipped from endless strikes. Yet he stood amidst the chaos, his voice hoarse but unbroken. "Stand! Stand with me! For Toyotomi, for honor!" But honor could not mend broken ranks. Around him, retainers fell one after another, throwing their bodies in vain to shield him. Yukida's men scattered, Konishi's were overrun, and many of the daimyo Mitsunari had trusted fled or surrendered outright. Above them, the ghost of Yotei lingered. He saw not just the fall of men but of ideals. Loyalty crumbled before ambition. Alliances dissolved into treachery. The ghost's spectral hand brushed the drifting banners, and he felt the weight of something greater. The death of an age of war, the birth of a new order forged in betrayal. Suddenly, 2 Naomasa's crimson-clad troops broke through. Mitsunari's final line collapsed. A retainer grabbed him by the sleeve, begging him to flee, but the Tokugawa swarm closed in like wolves. The ghost hovered near, his hollow eyes fixed on Mitsunari. Here it is, he thought, the moment when history devours the man who dared defy fate. And yet, Mitsunari did not fall with a warrior's clean death. Instead, he was seized, dragged down by Tokugawa soldiers. His sword was torn from his grip. Bound in ropes, he was forced to kneel in the mud, surrounded by the corpses of men who had bled for him. The ghost of Yotei tilted his head. This was no glorious end. This was humiliation. A general stripped not just of victory, but of dignity. The Battle of Sekigahara was over. Tokugawa Ieyasu stood unchallenged, his crest rising above the carnage. And in the silence that followed, the ghost felt the mountain's voice whisper through him. The age of war has ended. A shogun rises. The field of Sekigahara grew quiet at last. Where once 160,000 men clashed, only silence remained, broken by the moans of the dying and the cawing of crows. The valley smelled of powder, sweat, and death. Tokugawa Ieyasu dismounted from his horse and walked slowly across the ground, stepping over corpses and shattered weapons. His retainers followed closely, but he needed no guards now. Victory itself was his armor. He looked out over the field with sharp, calculating eyes. This was not merely a triumph of war. This was the forging of destiny. "Gather the prisoners," he commanded. His voice was low, almost casual, as though he were discussing the harvest rather than the fate of men. Among the captured were Ishida Mitsunari, Konishi Yukinaga, and other Toyotomi loyalists. They were bound, mud-soaked, dragged before Tokugawa's command tent. Mitsunari's face was pale, but his eyes still burned with unbroken pride. Tokugawa studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "You fought bravely, but you chose poorly. History belongs to those who endure, not those who dream." Mitsunari spat blood into the dirt. "History will curse you as a traitor to loyalty and honor." Tokugawa's gaze hardened, but he did not reply. He turned to his men. "Take him to Kyoto. Let the people see the face of defeat before his head is struck from his shoulders." The ghost of Yotei floated near, watching the exchange with eerie fascination. He had seen countless warriors die with steel in hand, but this was different. This was politics in its rawest form. Victory not only on the battlefield, but in memory, in reputation, in the story that would be told for generations. All around, executions began. Captured generals knelt before blades. Some accepted death with stoic calm. Others screamed for mercy. But the outcome was always the same. Heads rolled into baskets. Blood darkened the soil further. The ghost drifted through it all, his spectral presence brushing over the condemned. He felt the weight of their unspoken words, their regrets, their curses that rose like smoke into the twilight sky. And yet, amidst the carnage, the ghost felt a shift. The valley no longer belonged to chaos or to death. It belonged to Tokugawa. The battle was over, but its echo had just begun. Kyoto buzzed with whispers when the prisoners arrived. Crowds filled the streets to glimpse the once mighty generals of the West, now reduced to broken men in chains. The people craned their necks to see Ishida Mitsunari, his face gaunt, his steps heavy, yet his pride still visible in the way he refused to bow his head. Within days, the sentence was carried out. At Rokujogawara, Mitsunari and his allies were forced to kneel before the executioner. Their last words echoed with defiance. Vows of loyalty to Toyotomi, curses against Tokugawa. But one by one, the blade fell, and their voices were silenced forever. In Edo, Tokugawa Ieyasu received the news calmly, as if it had been inevitable. He had crushed the Toyotomi loyalists, removed his rivals, and gathered the loyalty of the strongest daimyo in Japan. The war was over. Now came something far greater, power beyond the battlefield. By 1603, he was named Sei Taishogun, the supreme military ruler of Japan. The Tokugawa Shogunate was born, a dynasty that would endure for more than 250 years. The land that had been fractured by constant war finally bent beneath a single will. Yet peace was bought with silence and fear. Daimyo who had once held ambition now bowed low, their swords bound not by steel but by politics. Castles were rebuilt not for freedom, but as gilded cages under Tokugawa's watchful eye. The ghost of Yotei wandered through the new order, restless. He passed through Edo's rising streets, through the palaces of the Tokugawa, through villages where farmers bowed to new taxes. He saw peace, yes, but not the peace of honor, the peace of submission. "Is this victory?" the ghost murmured to the night. "A world where ambition dies in silence? Where loyalty is a tool, not a virtue?" Mount Yotei whispered faintly in his memory. The spirit had waited centuries for the decisive clash of Sekigahara. He had found it, witnessed it, tasted its fire. But instead of release, he felt heavier than ever, bound to an age that had turned its back on the very ideals he once fought for. The age of warring states was gone. The age of the shogunate had begun. And the ghost drifted on, searching for meaning in a world that no longer had a place for warriors like him. Night fell upon the land, calm and deceptively serene. The fields of Sekigahara lay quiet now, reclaimed by fog and silence, as if the earth itself sought to bury the memory of the carnage. Grass would grow again, farmers would return, but the soil would forever drink the whispers of the dead. The ghost of Yotei hovered there one last time, drifting through the valley that had consumed so many dreams. He saw fragments of banners still clinging to broken poles, swords half buried in mud, helmets glinting faintly under the moonlight. To him, each relic was a story unfinished. A samurai who had once believed his blade could shape the world, Sekigahara, the ghost murmured, his voice hollow, echoing through the emptiness. A single battle where tens of thousands perished. And yet, it was not bravery or loyalty that decided the fate of Japan. It was betrayal. It was hesitation. It was fear. He thought of Ishida Mitsunari, proud, loyal, yet broken by the cowardice of men he trusted. He thought of Tokugawa Ieyasu, patient, calculating, who won not with the sword, but with time, with discipline, with the cold mastery of survival. And he thought of Kobayakawa Hideaki, the trembling boy whose one decision shattered an entire cause. Honor, the ghost whispered bitterly, died here. From his spectral vantage, he looked toward Edo, where Tokugawa's star now rose. Peace would follow, yes, but a peace bound in chains. The swords of the samurai would dull, their spirit caged by laws and duty. The ghost knew that his own kind, warriors who lived and died for glory, for loyalty, for a cause greater than themselves, belonged to a world that no longer existed. He lingered in silence, listening to the voices of the fallen that only he could hear. Some wept, some raged, some begged for remembrance. And the ghost realized his curse had deepened. He would carry their voices with him forever, wandering Japan as the eternal witness of its blood-stained birth. As dawn approached, Mount Yotei loomed in his memory once more, its silent slopes glowing faintly in the early light. The ghost turned away from Sekigahara, drifting back into the mists. Empires rise, empires fall, but the dead never leave. And with that, the ghost of Yotei vanished into the horizon, leaving the valley behind, a place where betrayal carved history, and the soul of Japan was forever changed.